today to speak also to the issue, but my my first responsibility is to, and very gratified to have that responsibility, is to introduce Laverne Cox, uh, Emmy-nominated actress who can be seen on the series Orange is the New Black, where she plays a groundbreaking role of Sophia. Uh, Laverne is the first trans woman of color to have a leading role in a mainstream television program. And Laverne is also producing a documentary to free Stacey in order to heighten visibility and awareness around surrounding Cissy McDonald, a transgender woman who is incarcerated for defending herself against a racist and transphobic attack. Laverne is the first trans woman of color to produce in her own television series, VH1's Transforming. Ms. Cox has spoken to eloquently about the need of LGBT data collection at the 2015 Social Good Summit, and we are happy and proud to have followed her recommendation and her demand, and have produced this piece of legislation that I hope that Congress and the leadership act quickly. It focuses on the census inability in its current form to represent transgender people, which is key in understanding demographic, socioeconomic, geographic trends, and needs within the LGBT community. In addition to her acting, Laverne is a renowned speaker and has taken her empowering message of moving beyond gender expectations to live more authentically all over the country. And in that role, it landed her on the cover of Time magazine in 2014. Indeed, a pleasure that Laverne was able to take the time to be with us today and to lend her very important and critical advocacy and support for the legislation. With that, let me invite Laverne to the podium for her comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And thank you so much, Congressman Grijalva, for inviting me to be here today to discuss what I feel is a vital issue, and that is the need for our government to improve and expand data collection about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities. Now, I've been so very blessed over the past few years to be able to live my dreams of becoming a working actor, and one of the great joys of the work that I do is getting to travel the country and meet LGBT people and people beyond the LGBT community who tell me that my visibility, that the character that I play on television, that my own personal story has inspired them to believe that they can live the full truth of their lives and pursue their dreams while living that full truth. They tell me that my visibility has encouraged them to believe that their lives matter, that their stories matter, and that they count. But indeed, because the federal government does not track LGBT, specifically sexual orientation and gender identity data, the lives of LGBT people in this country in a very specific way do not count. Transgender people specifically in this country are told that we don't exist, that our lives don't matter, that and I believe that because we don't have actual data, statistical data, that laws like the HB2 that was passed in North Carolina are passed, that let's give it up for free speech. It's such a wonderful thing. And so I believe that misinformation is allowed to be spread about transgender people because we don't have actionable data around who trans people are and about our lived experiences. We don't actually have accurate numbers of how many people exist in the United States because we don't ask about gender identity numbers in our national data. What we do know is that transgender people are twice as likely or much more likely to experience poverty than other populations. Our unemployment rate is twice the national average, 4 times that for trans people of color. We know that 78% of students in grade 12 who express a transgender non-conforming identity experience harassment or bullying. 78%. This is according to the Injustice at Every Turn National Transgender Survey, which was released in 2011. We also know from that survey that 41% of transgender people have attempted suicide. I'm one of those transgender people. And as I said earlier, so many of us have tried to take our lives because we exist in a world that often tells us that our lives don't matter, that we're not who we really say we are. We're not who we know ourselves to be. We experience discrimination in housing, in employment, in public accommodations. We are told that using the bathroom that is consistent with how we identify is something that we should not be able to do. In 2015, the homicide rate in the transgender community was twice the number of homicides that we experienced in 2014. It was the deadliest year on record. So many transgender Americans are coming forward and choosing to be visible in a world that tells us that we should not exist. They are standing up and being counted, and it is time that our federal government joins with those citizens and lets them know that their lives matter and that they do count. I'm here today to urge lawmakers to pass the LGBT Data Inclusion Act. It is vital that the lives of LGBT people are fully counted. There are hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funds that are allocated every year based on census data. And when we do not collect data about a certain group of people, it is as if we don't exist. But I am a testament that trans people and LGBT people do exist. And in 2016, we should all be counted. Thank you so much.
Let me invite the chairman of Democratic Caucus, the House of Representatives, good friend and ally, Mr. Javier Becerra from California. Sir?
Thank you. To Congressman Grijalva for his leadership on this issue, to my colleagues who I join proudly to support this legislation, and to people like Laverne Cox who stand so tall and proud. Let me just say that while sometimes times are tough, it's these kinds of moments that remind us that this country always figures out a way to redeem itself. And we have a lot of people in America, as great a democracy as this is, who still live in the shadows. Whether you're talking about immigrants, whether you're talking about too many folks in the LGBTQ community, or whether you go back just a few short decades when Latinos weren't even counted in our statistics, and therefore it was difficult to figure out what to do when it came to diabetes for them, what levels of poverty they suffered. If you're not on paper, you're invisible when it comes to the federal government. And it's time that we allowed all Americans to come out of the shadows, to live a life the way so many of us take for granted. And this legislation is so simple. It simply says, let's just keep tabs of all our different communities so that when we make decisions in an institution like this, where policy is so important, we know we're making it based on the right information, not on some Neanderthal's anecdotal story about our different communities. This legislation will be introduced today. I can't say that I have a great deal of hope that this Congress today will provide the votes to pass it, but I will simply say this. 20 years ago, when the 435 members of Congress had an opportunity to vote on a very important issue to so many folks in the LGBT community on a bill called the Defense of Marriage Act, there were only 67 of us who stood up and said, no, we should not put discrimination into our statutes by denying people who love each other the right to marry simply because of who they are. 20 years ago, only 67 of us were willing to vote no. And while today we may not have the votes to pass this legislation in this Congress, I guarantee you, in the future, we will, and we'll be able to remind people. But the most important thing we can articulate here today is that we want people to come out of the shadows. And we want people to stand tall, as you saw Laverne Cox do just now, because we will fight to make sure that America catches up to the right side of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me invite a leader of our caucus and a leader on the House of Representatives, a Democratic whip, Mr. Steny Hoyer. Sir.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, Laverne. I'm glad they let you out to be here with us.
I just play an inmate on television.
All right,
I've never been to prison.
No. I think everybody got that that was a joke.
Just making sure.
Good for you. Good for you. And by the way, I think the only way Laverne can stand is tall. So Barbara Mikulski would note that. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues. And this is a serious subject. This is about, as previous speakers have said, recognizing people for who they are and what they are, and they are Americans entitled to our focus, our consideration, and equal treatment under the law. And even more broadly than that, contrary to what some presidential candidates think, equal treatment and civility by all of us. I'm proud to stand with Representative Grijalva and other Democratic colleagues and declare that LGBT Americans have a right to be counted, to be recognized, to be respected. The LGBT Data Inclusion Act is an important piece of legislation, as the chairman of our caucus has said, that will make certain that all Americans are equally counted in federal surveys, including the census. Ensuring that everyone is counted is the first step in making sure everyone counts. When we fail to give members of a group the opportunity to raise their hands and say, "We're here, we count," they run the risk of losing their equal share of access to federal resources and their fellow citizens' respect. For too long, LGBT people, their families, and their communities have been forced to live in the shadows of society. Many, 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 many of them have had the courage to let people know who they are and what they are and demand respect for each. And because of their courage, our society is more open and fairer today than it was 10 years ago. And hopefully, as has been said, next year and the year after and the year after that, we will continue to move towards fairer treatment and respect for all. I want to thank Representative Grijalva for sponsoring this legislation. I hope we can move it to the floor. We saw when Sean Patrick Maloney had the courage to stand up and offer an amendment which said, "We will not discriminate," that had the majority of votes on the floor. Now, unfortunately, during the course of the vote, we lost that majority. But very frankly, what happened is over the next 4 or 5 days, some of our Republican friends heard from their constituents who said equality is what America is about, and non-discrimination ought to be our policy. And we ought not to vote against a bill, as the Republicans did, because it does not allow discrimination. How ironic is that? That you would vote against a bill because it does not allow discrimination. So I'm pleased to be a co-sponsor of this legislation. I'm pleased to join Representative Grijalva, chairman of our caucus, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Dina Titus. I guess we've gone through the members, and join you. Because of your celebrity, you bring attention to an issue that is critical, and we appreciate your doing that. I hope they will bring this legislation to the floor. Like the chairman of the caucus, convinced they'll do that. But if they bring it to the floor, I think it will pass, because I think the majority of the House of Representatives believe that equality is and must be the policy of our country. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hoyer mentioned Sean Patrick Maloney, co-chair of the Equality Caucus, and a great advocate and ally on issues of equality. And issues of underrepresentation, and proud to introduce him, co-chair of the Equality Caucus, Mr. Maloney.
Thank you. I want to thank my friend Raúl for his leadership on this. I want to thank Laverne, and thank you for your words. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the journey you've traveled. A lot of us have traveled a similar journey in this life. I'm an openly gay member of Congress. I'm the first openly gay person ever elected to Congress from the state of New York. My husband and I have been together for 24 years. We have 3 children together. Seems to me we ought to show up on a census somewhere. And I think it's pretty fundamental that the first way they discriminate is by denying you exist. It's always been the case that before you can actually engage with someone who you don't like or you want to discriminate against, you want to render them invisible. You want to say they don't count. You want to say they don't exist even. You want to dehumanize. You want to strip them of the same basic dignity and humanity that the rest of us take for granted. So while this bill may seem like a small step, it's actually critical to bringing people into the light of government data, so we know so some people can no longer deny that there's a full and vibrant and responsible and contributing community of LGBT people who are Americans, who work, who pay taxes, and who deserve to show up like all other Americans in all other ways in these types of government reports and accounting. You know, I appreciate the words of the majority leader and of our caucus chair about the difficulties we have in the Republican Congress getting things like this passed. But if my amendment last week and the week before showed anything, it's that there in fact isn't a majority against discrimination in the House of Representatives. It's not the majority running the House of Representatives, and that's a very different thing. But if you let this place vote, if you let the members vote, there is a majority of the House of Representatives right now to do all sorts of good things and to end discrimination under federal law. And so what we have seen over the last week is we have seen Speaker Ryan excuse racial discrimination because he wants to win a presidential race, and we have seen him excuse discrimination against LGBT people because he wants to win the vote on appropriations bills. It's wrong to discriminate against Americans. It doesn't matter what you win if you give up your soul in the process. We should say it's wrong to discriminate who are American citizens by suggesting they are something otherwise because of where they came from, and it's wrong to suggest that people who are LGBT are less in any way than all other Americans. My kids are not less than somebody else's kids. My relationship is not less than someone else's relationship. When I came to the United States House of Representatives, it was illegal under federal law for my spouse to receive health insurance because of the Defense of Marriage Act. We ended that, and that was a proud step forward. And the Supreme Court took us the next step by enshrining marriage equality as the law of the land. It is disgraceful that in 2016, members of Republican leadership would be making excuses for anti-gay discrimination on the House floor. There's a reason the Democratic caucus chanted shame, and it's not just because they switched the votes, it's because they were fighting for discrimination in an age when we should be fighting for equality. And that's pretty simple, isn't it? It shouldn't be that hard to figure out. When you're up there rationalizing discrimination to win, you are on the wrong side of history, and you ought to go home and look in the mirror and ask yourself what you're doing. And when you're up there excusing racial discrimination because you want to win a presidential race, you're doing something wrong, and you're on the wrong side of history. And you ought to ask yourself, what do I really stand for? What does this House really stand for? And if you're going to rig the process and rig the votes and rig the bills and make this whole thing a sham so you can accomplish a discriminatory goal, then my God, how can you claim to be a servant of the Constitution and spare me the lectures about how we're going to let this place work its will, and we're going to let the members bring good ideas, and we're going to see what happens when we open this place to a real democratic process. Because if that were true, we would have won last week. We would have an appropriations bill that wrote discrimination out of law instead of leaving it in law. And that's the difference between this leadership and the one a lot of us would like to see to run this House. So while this bill is one small step in the right direction, make no mistake, this is part of a much larger fight, and it's time that people understood the consequences of being on the wrong side of this battle. They will have to answer for their actions in 2016 to their kids, to their grandkids, and to history when they are asked the question, where did you stand in the fight for full equality for all Americans? So I want to thank Laverne, I want to thank Representative Grijalva for their leadership today, and I want to pledge to keep fighting with everyone in the LGBT community until we are full equal citizens of the country we call our own. Thank you very much.
Let me introduce a wonderful member of Congress, member of the LGBT Equality Caucus, and we're very happy that she has joined this Congress. She's made an impact as soon as she arrived, and a good ally and a hard-working member of Congress, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, if she would come up.
Thank you, Representative Grijalva. It's almost unnecessary to get up here. I can just say I agree with everything my colleagues and our guests have said today. You know, as an African-American woman, I know what discrimination is. I know what unfair discrimination is. But by being a woman, although we're getting ready to do something about that, right? And, amen, and as an African-American. And I know what it is for government to say, well, we didn't know, we don't know. I don't know to put resources here, or we put resources there, we don't know. That's why it's so important to collect information. Earlier today, I was on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and I spoke to Mr. Thompson, who is responsible for the census that's going to be collected in 2020. And I said to him, have you included questions regarding the LGBT community? Have you included questions regarding gender identity? And have you included questions regarding sexual orientation? Because what the information reveals in the census informs our public policy debate and decisions in the future. And so we don't want anyone to say they don't know what is needed. They know now what is needed to be an African American and the challenges that we face. They know what it is that with a disparity in pay when it comes to women. They know, not anecdotally, they know empirically. So we may not be doing enough about those things, but we know that they exist. And the same thing is clear when it comes to the LGBT community. We know anecdotally. We need to know substantively. We need the collection of data to support the policy that we need to put in place to ensure that discrimination does not take place, to ensure that even police and laws change to recognize the discrimination that these communities have faced. And so I'm delighted to be a co-sponsor of this legislation. I don't think that this is a small step. I think it's a significant step in helping the federal government to become accountable for what it should be accountable for. And then we will continue to move forward because we have a collective responsibility to break down every barrier and every wall of discrimination that exists, because this is America. And in America, we should be judged based upon the content of our character, the capacity to do the work, our education, and our willingness to serve. And we in the Democratic Caucus will not be silent until we get it. Thank you.
Two other members of Congress that have joined us, Congresswoman Titus from Nevada, Mr. Deutsch from Florida, and let me ask Ms. Titus if she has any comments that she would like to add to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Mr. Grijalva, and thank you so much for your leadership on this important issue. Others have said it much more eloquently than I can, but I just want to add my voice to the chorus to say that this is a great way to celebrate Pride Month, is with the introduction of a bill that says everybody counts. That's the first step, and it's an important step. So we have a lot of work to do. Let's get this passed. Let's pass the Equality Act. Let's stop the bullying, and let's make Stonewall a national park. I mean, why not? Even as we stand here today, just saying let people count, there are some of our colleagues who are looking for ways to amend some of the Appropriations Act to change the bathroom policies here on the Hill to discriminate against the transgender community. So I say to Laverne or to anybody else, if you feel uncomfortable going to any of the bathrooms here on the Hill, come to my office. It's a multi-use. Anybody, you can use our bathroom. So don't hesitate to stop by if that's something that you need to do. Laverne said she was in Las Vegas recently. I say come back often. You are always welcome. So let's get the job done.
Thanks, Raúl, and thanks everyone for being here. And Laverne, thanks. It's really wonderful to have you. I want to just take a moment to thank Sean Patrick Maloney. The calls of shame were what drew a lot of attention, but the reason that we were able to engage in a really meaningful discussion and debate, and to really highlight the differences that exist in this body, were a direct result of his passionate advocacy and his unwillingness to accept discrimination. It is outrageous. It's outrageous that it's more important to preserve hatred than it is to actually engage in the work that we're here to do. And that's what we saw happen over the past few weeks in the House. I just want to say a word about the Data Inclusion Act. It's a terrible name. But here's why. Here's why, right? Because the data that we're gathering, the data that this is about not about checked boxes on a survey. This is not about percentages. This is not about pie graphs. The data that we're gathering is personal data about real people who are already included. They're included in our communities. They're part of our communities. They're part of the fabric of our country. And it's about time that we have real information, that we move forward into the 21st century so that we have real information to understand and to show those of our colleagues who still every day fight to hold us back from achieving full equality for the LGBT community, that we finally have the data to show exactly what's happening in our community, and to help them understand that the LGBT community is our community, that we're all engaged in the same act of trying to make this country a little bit better, that the LGBT community is participating in our communities, in every community around the world, in every part of America, all throughout the country, on school boards all throughout the country, volunteering all throughout the country, raising families who, as my colleague Congressman Maloney points out, are just exactly the same as everyone else's. That's what this is about. That data is real people. And that inclusion is simply to acknowledge what already is the case, that the LGBT community is included. This is simply a way to have the information to show it, and so that we can address real needs that exist in a way that is not discriminatory, and in a way that recognizes that our country is stronger when no discrimination exists. That's what this is about. I'm proud to be associated with it. I'm proud to co-sponsor it. I'm so grateful for your leadership on this. Thanks very much.
In putting the legislation together, we had help from many advocate organizations, many organizations in the community, LGBT community, civil rights organizations, and I want to thank them. I'm going to invite some principals from some of the organizations with us today to please come up and make some comments. I do want to take the time, the prerogative, to thank Yesenia Chavez from my staff, who work like crazy on this. And I know members of Congress should never give credit to their staff because we do everything. No, we don't. And I'm very fortunate to have some really good staff, and Yesenia is one of them. And with that, let me ask Laura Durso, Senior Director of LGBT's Research and Communications Project, the Center of American Progress, if she's here. A couple of comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Durso, and I'm the Senior Director of the LGBT Research and Communications Project at the Center for American Progress. It is a real honor to join Representative Grijalva and so many members of Congress, with my trusted colleagues, and with the incomparable Laverne Cox, to offer CAP's strong support for the LGBT Data Inclusion Act. This bipartisan and bicameral bill represents a new wave of LGBT equality legislation, a push for not just legal equality, but for true lived equality. CAP is honored to have worked so closely with you all on a measure that will help us build ladders of opportunity for LGBT people and their families across the country. Throughout our country's history, the federal government has recognized the importance of data and of demographic information in building a government that represents, reflects, and serves all of its people. And despite historic advancements at the local, state, and federal level, the picture of who LGBT people are and what we need to live healthy and secure lives remains vastly incomplete. The LGBT Data Inclusion Act helps to fill those gaps and will provide policymakers with the tools that they need to aid our community and to make our nation's programs more efficient and more effective for the people that they serve. Because we cannot serve an LGBT senior a meal unless we know that they are hungry. We cannot keep an LGBT young person safe unless we know where they lay their head at night. And we cannot keep LGBT families out of poverty unless and until we acknowledge that too many of them are living on the brink. And there may not be a silver bullet to solving these problems, but in order to find answers, we need to begin asking questions. As we stand here today, we do know that the experiences of LGBT people vary widely across the country. In far too many states, LGBT people, and particularly transgender people, currently find themselves under siege by their own state governments. Last month, the Attorney General of the United States delivered historic remarks in which she stated to transgender people and to people across the country that the federal government sees you, stands with you, and will do everything it can to protect you. The LGBT Data Inclusion Act continues that effort forward. It demonstrates every person is seen, counted, and valued. And for LGBT, that simple message can save lives. I want to thank Representative Grijalva and all of you for your leadership on this bill and for your unwavering support for equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the help. I have to, the members will be leaving pretty soon because they called a vote. And I want to first, before we have to depart, as the vote gets near, to thank my colleagues that came and the colleagues that are here, and to thank Laverne Cox for her leadership, and more importantly for adding immeasurably to the momentum for this legislation. We're very, very grateful for that. And we have other colleagues that are going to address you. Please excuse us if we walk away, but they'll pay us occasionally to go and vote, so we need to do that part of our job. Adam Romero, Senior Counsel, Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law, and following him will be Harper Jean Tobin, Director of Policy, the National Center for Transgender Equality. And I've already thanked all the organizations that helped us. Let me do that again. And these individuals that will speak to you as well were factors in putting this legislation together and being advocates for this legislation with our colleagues. So I want to thank them as well. Mr. Romero.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Adam Romero and I am the Arnold D. Kassoy Scholar of Law at the Williams Institute. The Williams Institute is a research center at UCLA School of Law dedicated to conducting rigorous, independent, and multidisciplinary research related to sexual orientation and gender identity. And so I come to the podium not as an advocate, but as a researcher in search of knowledge. And our research enables public policymakers to make decisions that impact LGBT people based on facts and evidence rather than myths and assumptions. For example, contrary to the myth that all gay people are affluent, the research demonstrates not only great economic diversity among LGBT people, but that LGBT people, especially racial minorities, women, and transgender individuals, are disproportionately impoverished and homeless. The evidence also demonstrates that LGBT people face persistent and pervasive discrimination in employment, housing, bullying at school, and physical violence. Another myth we hear is that LGBT people only live in San Francisco, New York City, and other large urban centers. But the data could not be more clear that the millions of LGBT people live all across the United States, in every state, and in almost every, if not all, county in the United States, urban, suburban, and rural. While our understanding of the LGBT population has grown, we are missing crucial information. For example, we do not have a full picture of LGBT people's employment, unemployment, and general economic experiences, and we do not even have a firm count of the number of LGBT people in every state or across the country. That's because most federal surveys do not ask people to voluntarily and confidentially disclose their sexual orientation and their gender identity. People do, of course, provide other personal information on these surveys, such as their race, ethnicity, age, sex, and income. And these data provide important information about disparities across society. But without a means to identify LGBT people in these data sets, we lack vital information about LGBT people. For this reason, the LGBT Data Inclusion Act is an important piece of legislation that aims to increase our knowledge and understanding of the LGBT community so that we can better understand our entire nation and all of its wonderful diversity. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Harper Jean Tobin, as you heard, with the National Center for Transgender Equality. And I'll be brief because I'm here in the hot sun and some of us have to go to the bathroom. I've been privileged to work with many of the members of Congress supporting this bill. I've been up here probably on the Hill hundreds of times. I'm pretty sure that I've used every ladies' room in this building and the ones surrounding it, and I'm pleased to report that the Republic has not fallen yet. Mother Jones ran a piece this morning talking about the introduction of this important bill, and their headline is exactly the question that I'm asked most often by reporters and policymakers and school administrators and everyone. How many transgender Americans are there? And despite the fact that trans people are more visible in society than ever before, that I know that we live everywhere and come from all walks of life, I cannot give a simple answer to that. I can say over 1 million, we think, based on multiplying data from 2 state surveys, by population estimates, we think. And if they ask me anything else, I have to confess that we really don't know because the government isn't asking. All around the country now you hear people who want to abridge transgender people's rights and dignity saying, this is a totally new issue. We don't know anything about about this. We don't think these people live here. We don't know why it's important. I get asked all the time questions. You know, are there transgender students in our school district? How many transgender students are there? How many transgender people are incarcerated? How many don't have health insurance? And how many are sleeping on the streets at night? On those things, I have to say that I know it's too many, but I really can't say. We've taken some major steps to create opportunity and improve the lives of LGBT people. We know there is much further to go. NCTE has had to do our own surveys because we're not in the surveys. The statistics you heard Ms. Cox mention earlier are from surveys we had to do of transgender people. And we don't know the scope of the problems. We know transgender people face those serious challenges she was talking about: unemployment, homelessness, being victims of crime. And we know that, but we don't know the scope of the problems, who's affected, where it's getting better or worse, because we're not counting. We can change that. We can make things better and fairer for LGBT people. We can do that, but one of the things that we have to do is ask people who they are, where they are, and what their lives are like, what's going on in their lives. Those are the building blocks of solutions. And this bipartisan bill will help us get a long way down that road. So I'm deeply grateful for all the members of Congress behind it, and so glad to join Ms. Cox, whose work and achievements have been a beacon to so many young people, in supporting this critical bill. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Raúl Grijalva, I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you to our distinguished guests and experts. Particular thanks to Laverne and to the whip and to Chairman Becerra. So thank you all very much. And if you have any questions, I'm not an expert on the legislation, but I'll do my best. Go ahead.
Actually, I have two questions for, one question for you and Laverne.
Sure, come on up.
As members of the LGBT community, I was wondering what message you would have for Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who is the chairman of the committee where this bill is being sent, and he would have the ability, if he wants to release it or bottle it up. And he's not been a supporter of LGBT rights, as you may know. So just wondering what message would each of you have for him?
Well, I would say to him that LGBT people exist. We are a vital part of the fabric of this country, and we just want to be counted. This is the United States of America. Every single person in this country should count. This is a democracy, and this is really just about counting people, acknowledging that we exist and counting us. That's pretty basic, and I think we all deserve that.
And the chairman doesn't need to support it. Just give it a vote, and we'll pass it. I mean, our message is join us. It's not too late to get on the right side of this issue. You're going to want a basic. So it's not too late to our Republican colleagues. Please join us on this bill and on the Equality Act, by the way, which is also being held up by Chairman Goodlatte in the Judiciary Committee. You know, if they don't want to talk about these issues in the appropriations process, we can talk about them in the committees of jurisdiction if they let those bills have a hearing and come to a vote. Democracy, and we're not afraid of people still, opposing us. We can live by democracy. Just don't rig the process, I'd say.
Of life and death, that people are committing suicide, people are being murdered because on a systemic level, we are often told that we don't exist, that our lives don't matter, that we're not who we say we are. Bills are being passed to stigmatize and criminalize us. This is a matter of life and death.
Sure. Eric Garcia, roll call here. This is a question for Ms. Cox and you, Congressman. There have been, like you said, a lot, not just there's Mississippi, there's a few other states. Do you think that in some ways, though, that, and obviously what happened on the House floor last week, do you think in some ways, though, that could mobilize and actually encourage, in what ways, how can it mobilize and encourage and kind of lead to kind of, I guess what you would say, momentum turning in your favor? How could that happen?
Well, look, you see people like Laverne getting involved. This is about people getting involved and standing up. And we want to be counted, right? And that's what this is about. It's about all of us. And I do think it's already happening. I mean, look, we got 36 votes on the House floor. They switched the votes of 7 of them, brought it down to 29. What happened? Those 36 people went home, particularly the 7 who switched, and they got an earful. And they came back and we got 43 votes. So the public is on our side. And this is not just an important issue, as Laverne says. The community is accepting